Hello, and welcome to another session on using the new Blender for video editing. Today we're going to cover handy things to know about the graph editor. So let's get started. Right now you can see I've already set up my scene. I have a video strip here. Runs a little bit like 8.5 seconds worth. I've also got a couple of strips here which we'll talk about later. And to get started, we'll use Blender's handy feature to do an automatic fade in and fade out. So from the add menu, go to fade, fade in and out. Now we can't see the video strip anymore. Now let me scroll up over here and you can see what Blender has done is it has added keyframes. So at the very first frame, it set a keyframe for opacity set to 0. And if I press the up arrow to jump to the next one, 1 second in, 1 second because of the fact that we have frame rate of 30 frames per second. So we're now at frame 31, and then it has set another keyframe here with opacity 1. So it's set up so that within 1 second it goes from nothing to full opacity. And similarly, if I press the up arrow again, you can see we're over here near the end. It does the same thing. It sets it in reverse, sets up a keyframe with a value of 1, and then at the end of it, a keyframe with value 0. Okay. And now the other thing is, before we jump into the graph editor, is if I zoom in on this one section of the video strip, you can see Blender has this nice little feature where it visually shows you the opacity of the strip. So we can see that for the first few frames, there is it's basically not visible, and then it slowly ramps up and then kind of tapers off until it finally gets to the full opacity over there. Now that I've shown all that in the video sequence editor, it's time to go into the graph editor. I am going to replace the contents of this area with the graph editor. Okay, and we need a lot of space to see what we're doing here. So I'm going to change the window layout as well. I'm going to right click on this point here and say join areas, and then let it fill this section. So now this whole thing is the graph editor. But of course we still want to be able to see our preview. So I am going to go down over here. My mouse changes to crosshairs. I'm going to left click and drag it over. So I have a new area here, and I will change that to preview and then hide that. There we go. All right, so now we're back to having our preview, except this time it's in the bottom left. And now we have this whole space for our graph editor. So now that we have this, what are we looking at? Well, it's a graph. And so really the question then is, so what is being plotted here? Well, along the x-axis, this represents time. So it's very similar to us working with the video sequence editor. So I can scrub across, just like with the video sequence editor, and we are basically scanning through our scene, okay, forwards and backwards. And the values, the numbers up here, these represent the frames. So at the very beginning, we are at frame number 1, and then it just moves forward from there. And because we are at 30 frames per second, this represents 1 second in, roughly. Actually, go one more. There we go. And then that's where we have our second keyframe. So if going across, if the x is time, then the y would be the value of the property that you're animating. And that's where things can get a bit tricky, because you can be animating multiple properties of a single strip at the same time. But right now, all we've set up so far is keyframes for opacity. So that's all we're seeing. And I can zoom in a bit here. Actually, let me press Shift B and do a box zoom. So now we can see just this area here from the first frame up until this point, which is the animation of opacity using this gentle curve. Let me increase that a little bit and then bring it over so we can see it a little bit better. Now, the thing that we've seen already is that it's not a straight line, so it kind of ramps up. Then we have this solid bit here where it's increasing the opacity steadily, and then it slows down to that point. Each one of these points then are keyframes. And the fun thing about the graph editor is that you can work directly with them just by clicking and dragging. So for example, if I didn't want the fade in to start right at the first frame, I can click on this and just drag it over so it starts somewhere else. And you'll notice the other keyframe was moving as well, because just like with the video sequence editor, you can move everything in one shot. So let me just let go and press Ctrl Z. So we're back to the beginning. And this time I'll make sure I have this one as the only one selected. And then I will click and drag so that now this is the only one that's moving. The one in the top right is stationary. And I can position it here at 15 frames, which is roughly half a second. So half a second delay before it actually starts fading in. Now, just like with the video sequence editor, you can move the item anywhere. And let's say if we are working on something, we want to make sure we're just changing the time, like when it happens, as opposed to the value. I can press the X key on my keyboard, and then that locks it along the X-axis. So it doesn't matter if I'm a little bit messy with my mouse movements, it will ignore the up and down motion of my mouse. If I only wanted to change the value and I didn't want to change the time of it, I can press the Y key, and now it remembers that, the starting point was frame 1. So now it's locked at frame 1, and it's ignoring my left and right movement and just focusing on the up and down. And yeah, let's talk about curves. I'm going to bring focus on this, and you can see the thing about how it's curved, that's actually something that you can control. So for example, let's say you don't like the fact that it takes a little bit of time before it starts really fading in. You want it to be a constant speed of going from 0 to 1. To do something like that, you go to the key menu, and down over here under Interpolation mode, you would pick linear. Right now it's set to this value called Bezier, which gives you that gentle kind of S-curved shape. If I set it to linear, you can see that this now changes to a straight line. Straight line drawn from this keyframe here to that keyframe there. Okay, so, and sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't, but now you know how to do it, so you can pick and choose what kind of interpolation you want to use. Alright, so we've talked about moving the keyframes so you can change the time or value of it. We've talked about interpolation mode. Let's talk now about extrapolation. But before we do that, let's prepare the content. So I am going to return to the video sequence editor, zoom out there, and click over here. And now I will unhide these two items. So I have a color strip and I have a text strip. For these two items, I want them to slide across the screen at a consistent speed. So I'm going to start by pressing page down to jump to the start of this color strip. And then I am going to go over here in this properties down to position. I will set a keyframe here by pressing the I key. So that goes yellow, and then now we have some content showing up here. And then let's say by the time we get to the 7-second mark, that's when it should be pretty much across to the other side. So now I'm going to just click and drag with my left mouse button Oh, I see that it's over to here on this other side, and I'll just let go there. And I could press I, or the other option is just to click on this diamond shape here. It does the same thing. And that's it. So if I scrub across now, you'll see that hello world, well, hello world, the text stays there, but the blue bar, the blue color strip is definitely moving. Now let's see what's going on over here in the graph editor. So we can see our one keyframe right here, and starting at value of 0, but it just skyrockets right up. So can't really see anything now. I will hit the home button, and then now it's easier to see what's going on. So it's doing this in a linear fashion, which is exactly what I want. I want it to be a constant speed, so linear interpolation is the way to go. And so from the 2-second mark at 0 up until, well, 211 frames in at this value up here, which is, we can read it here, 752. But now it stops at this point, and we have several frames to go, but it doesn't go past that point. The easy way to do this is linear extrapolation, which means that Blender will just automatically allow the curve to go past the keyframes that you set. Let me zoom this out a little bit, and then you'll see how that works. To make it happen, we go to Channel and Extrapolation mode down here, and then linear extrapolation. As soon as I click this, there, you can see now it just draws a straight line all the way across. So if I continue scrubbing, you can see it keeps going, and if we had had enough frames, it would totally disappear off the other side. That's a very handy way to set some keyframes and animate something when you know what you're after is a constant speed, but you don't want to have to fiddle with trying to set the exact value and time so that it looks right. You can just work with the part that you can see, like we did here, and then set those to establish your speed, and then from there just enable linear extrapolation so Blender takes care of the rest. The only other thing that we need to do to fix this is just the starting frame of our strip, because as you can see here, while the animation goes beyond our first keyframe, the strip does not. So anywhere over here, there is no color strip at all. So no problem, I can just click on this edge and just drag it out, and there we go. So we now have our fully animated color strip. So let me jump to the beginning and hit the play button. You can see there it is, just moving at that nice steady rate from the left to the right. So that's linear extrapolation. Now let's talk about copying and pasting keyframes from one strip to another, because the strip, the color strip, is moving, but hello world is not. And while we could try to replicate exactly what we did with the color strip, setting those two keyframes at exactly the right points, we don't have to. We can just take those keyframes, copy them, and paste them into the other strip. So let me stop this. And before I do anything else, I will also just extend this so that it goes past. Okay, so the whole trick to this is that there's actually a starting step that you must do before you can copy and paste keyframes from one strip to another. And that is to set a keyframe for the property that you want to animate in the strip that you want to paste the keyframes into. So we're working with the X position of the strip, and that is down here under transform, this position X. So we need to set a keyframe right now. Don't worry about what the value is, we just need to set something. So I will just press the I key so that we have our keyframe. Once we have that, we can click to select our color strip, the source for these keyframes we want to copy. Make sure that both or all the keyframes are selected, and they are, but if they're not, you can just press the A key. Now you can press Control-C to copy, or you can go to Key and choose Copy Keyframes from here. Okay. Now that they're copied, return to the strip that you want to paste them into, and you can press Control-V or go to Key and say Paste Keyframes. And there you go. So these keyframes are pasted now, but just the keyframes, not that extrapolation mode. What we wanted, though, was exactly that. We want to have that right slope, because slope represents the speed, and that's what we're after. So we have those keyframes set. Now we just need to finish this process by going to Channel, Extrapolation mode, and again we pick Linear Extrapolation. And now you can see that if I jump to beginning, we have both strips now. The text strip and the color strip are moving at the same speed, but they're not quite the way I would like it. I want the hello world to be centered within the color strip. So we can do that here. Remember again, we can, within the graph editor, we can change both of these frames, of these keyframes at the same time. I just need to press on the G key and then maybe just press the Y to lock it along the Y-axis, and I'll just adjust this until it matches. And that looks about right, so I will let go and see how that looks. Looks good enough for me, at least for this demonstration. Alright, so that's it for the graph editor. Before we go, I just wanted to show you one thing which has nothing to do with the graph editor, but it's another way to do what we just did, having multiple strips animated in the same way. So what we just showed you, we took the keyframes from one strip and we pasted them into the other and then did some other manipulation so that everything looked great. But there's another way to do that, and that is to use MetaStrips. So let me start by clearing off all the keyframes for both of these things. So get rid of them from the text and the color. So a MetaStrip, very quickly, is just a grouping of strips. So you can do it for a couple reasons. For our purposes today, it's so that we can animate the group of strips in one shot instead of animating each one and making sure they're pretty much the same. I did create a video all about MetaStrips, and there should be a link on the top right for you to click on if you're interested. But anyway, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to select both of these strips in here, and then I will say strip, and I will say make MetaStrip. So now it has taken those two and turned them into one strip. You have to adjust the blend mode, so I gotta click on that and change that back to overdrop so we can see underneath it. And now you see we have the single strip to work with, so I can animate this one MetaStrip and it affects everything inside of it. So let me go ahead and set a keyframe, here, and then let's move ahead a bit, and then I'll set a keyframe over there, like that. Okay, and then like we talked about before, now I go to Channel and set Extrapolation mode to Linear, and that should be it. So if I click over here, hit the play button, you see there we go. So we've animated the MetaStrip, and therefore everything within it has been animated in a similar fashion. So nice things to know about the graph editor, and there's actually a lot more to know. I have other videos in my Blender 2.79 playlist if you want to see more. I'm probably not going to talk more about it in here. Actually, well, there's one more thing, but there is plenty of other things to know if you're interested. So hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please do give this a like and subscribe so you can see more content when it comes. Thanks, and bye now.